All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our workshop. And for today, we're going to be going over top interview tips for international students. And so, just to give a quick intro, my name is Sarah Sasaki, and I am an internship and employment specialist here at the Career Center. And also, fun fact, I am CSULB alum. I went here for undergrad and then also here for grad school. All right. And so, again, before we get into our website and a lot of great resources for the presentation, I know, it's a lot of information, so I'm going to be making sure to send out the slides and also this recording to you all afterwards for attending. And just to make sure, is anyone here for a class assignment? You can like raise your hand or like send something in the chat. Let's see. Okay, sounds good, Jenna. And let's see, I think it's pronounced, is it Janaea? And so for the class assignment, so you do need to take down notes from the workshop. And so these can either be typed or handwritten. And then, just to make sure that, you're getting the main points throughout the presentation. And then for both of you, I'll make sure to send the instructions of who to send the notes to make sure you can receive verification for your class assignment. And so I'll make sure to follow up with both of you after for that. And so, okay, sounds good. And so, all right. And so, yeah, with that, let's see. Oh, yeah, for hands, you can go ahead and lower them for now. And then I made sure to take a note for both of you there. Okay, and so we're gonna get in back into the presentation now then. And so firstly, for interviewing, to get more information and more resources as well, we do have our website. And so this is csulb.edu/career development center. And you can also Google CSULB Career Center as well. And this is what our homepage looks like. And you're going to see off to that right-hand side, kind of bottom right, interviewing. And so we have a lot of great information and tips and resources there. And so again, when you click on that interviewing part, it's going to take you to preparing for interviews. And so you're going to see, sections like, oh, what are some common interview questions that are asked? Or, again, what question should I be asking the employer? Or, again, how do I send that follow-up thank you email, as a courtesy there? And so, again, really good content, for you to take a look at there. And so with that, let's see. We're going to go into what do employers really want to know? And so for an interview, employers or, whoever you're speaking with, they're really trying to determine if you're a good fit for the position and the company. And I feel like the fact that you got an interview, that already shows they are taking you very seriously. You are someone that they could see in the role. But again, they want to get some more details. And I feel like, also having that conversation with you, how's your personality? You know, are your values and personality a good match for the position and for the company? And, do you have like the necessary skills and experiences, to be successful in whatever position you're going for? And so, with all of that, at the same time, you're also kind of interviewing the employer too. You should see if this, organization, if this position is a good fit for you, because I feel like it's really easy to fall into the I need to impress them as much as possible, which yes, you should, make that good impression. But at the same time, it shouldn't come at the cost of you saying like, yes, I can relocate if you're not able to, or like, yes, I am happy to work, this kind of schedule, even though that is not what I want at all. And so again, making sure that, you're standing your ground too in what you need from the position. And so we're gonna go into before the interview, and we're gonna go into the different like stages, like before the interview, the day of the interview, and after the interview. All right, so we're before the interview, so making sure that we're doing that research. We want to be as prepared as possible. You don't want them to ask you like, "Oh, what made our company stand out to you?" And you're like, "You had a pretty website," and like that's it. And so again, for researching, some places you can look. The company website, if you want to take a look at, usually they'll have some kind of like about us or like who we are section, and then Also looking at their mission statement, which a mission statement basically has like, what are their values? Like, what are their, like goals, with the work that they do there. And then there's also news articles, if you literally just want to Google the company, and then for Google, there will be like a news tab you can click on and see what articles come up from there. And so, if you're kind of staying up to date, you can see what's going on right now for the company, and it shows you kind of went that extra mile with your research. And you can also use a really great website called Glassdoor, which I'm going to show pictures of in the next few slides. And Glassdoor, this is a great place to look up company info. You can see a profile on a company, which has information about like, you know, actual employee reviews or again, like what kind of questions were they asked in the interview? So again, that interview information there. And then you can look at social media if they are on it. You can see what they're posting about, check out their stories. And also LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really great too, to look up, companies, what have they been posting? I feel like LinkedIn is almost kind of like a social media, for a company. And so you can see kind of what's going on, like, oh, they have, this exciting project coming up, or things like that there. All right. And so this is Glassdoor. And so for Glassdoor, and so, again, you can see on the top, jobs, company, salaries, interviews, etc. And Glassdoor, they have updated their website. So please don't be alarmed if this does not look the same as what they have on their website right now. And so, if you look at this middle part here, you'll see jobs, companies, and reviews. You would click on companies and reviews, type in the company you're trying to find more info about, and then go from there. And so, if we're looking at Hulu, for example, like I can see a lot. I can see, again, like their mission, their overview. I can see again, like, okay, what kinds of jobs they have, benefits, salaries, interviews, and, just a lot of information, that you can, use for your research there. And so, again, really, we can hone in on that interview part because we can see things like average like interview difficulty. We can see, how people got their interview. And so for Hulu at this time, it was mostly through online. And you can see what experiences were like, where I would say, for, about half, was about positive there. And so I think this is a really great resource to use because, when you're looking at this interview section, you can see, you can maybe just look up like international student, international candidate. You can see if other international students have applied for this company organization and what that process was like for them if they do share those insights there. And so, again, that's for Glassdoor there, really great resource. And so, let's see here. All right. So now when we're looking at preparing for common interview questions. And so, I mean, there's a lot they could ask, but I would say these are really good questions to, think about, practice responses for. And so, for this first one, why did you choose to study in the US? And so, again, this question, I feel like it just helps to give more detail about like, who you are, why you made this decision for yourself. And, again, for yourself, maybe this was like, I just want to, grow in, my like, global experiences. I want to be able to, again, expand my knowledge, of like, fields like here in the US, based here in the US, for example. And so again, yeah, just for them to, get more context there. And so I would not recommend just saying like, oh, I just woke up and decided to. Just having some more detail so they can see, again, you made this decision with intention there. And then how do you adapt to a new environment? And so I feel like this is, a really important question and also an important skill too, because adaptability, again, in you coming to study here in the US as an international student, you are adapting to a new environment, a new school, a new city, a new state, a new country, for that matter. And so, I feel like already in you making the decision to study here, I'm already seeing adaptability skills for all of you here today. And so, again, in addressing this question, I feel like it's going to help the employer in seeing, how would you adjust to our company, for example? How would that be for you? And, this doesn't just apply to international students, this applies to everyone. How are you going to, transition into this role and into our organization here? And so for this question, making sure you're providing examples. I think for interviewing in general, whenever we give a response, so whether it's like, oh, what's your biggest strength? Oh, it's communication. If you don't give any examples or details about that, anyone could say that. But if you say one of my strengths is communication because I'm very comfortable interacting with, people. I've had experiences in, customer service jobs, for like books and library or for bookstores and libraries. Um, and I feel like for this question, it could be showing examples from, maybe from your classes, or if you're part of like any like student organizations, and even in you adapting, to being here, in Long Beach, for example. And so again, really good question, to prepare for there. And then, are you able to relocate or travel? And so I would say this question, it does depend on, like what your goals are as of now. Because, if you're like, if you're just applying for whether it's like campus jobs, well, you wouldn't necessarily need to relocate besides, just kind of the commute there. But, if you're also, let's say, maybe in your last year and you're thinking about, OPT or like optional practical training to have that kind of like around that 1 year time frame to work after you graduate. And if you might have to relocate, just being honest with what you're capable of, because you wouldn't want to just say yes and you're like, I actually can't, and that's not going to work out. Because again, I wouldn't want it to be where they have this expectation of you, and then you say yes, but then it's like you can't do it. And then it's like, okay, so then we can't move forward at this process then. And so, you know, I think, yeah, I know it's a lot of like, things to consider so far, like as you're preparing for interviewing. And so I do want to say, we're going to have time at the end for questions as well. And so, but yeah, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to send them in the Zoom chat, and then I'll make sure to address them at the end there. Okay. And so, for preparing for some more common interview questions. So, again, tell me about yourself. And so, really thinking about what do I want to make sure they know about me. And again, for this question, it's really giving like a summary of your education, your experience, your skills. And I like to frame it where we kind of start off with like what you're currently doing right now in the present. We kind of give those highlights from what happened in the past. And then we look ahead to the future there. And like, what are your goals? How can this position help you with that there? And then, why do you want to work for us? Again, so we want to stay away from kind of like the typical, oh, it's aligned with my major. This is, I like the work you do. And those are extremely valid responses. And you can bring those up still. But we do want to help you stand out as much as we can. And so that's where I think it's really helpful to go back to that company research of, again, their mission or value statement or looking at the work they do, the services they provide. Um, just so you can elaborate more, because let's say an organization you're applying to really values community service. If you're someone who likes to volunteer, you can make that connection there and you can show, again, I've done my research, but also you align very well with who I am and my own values here. And so again, but at that same time, kind of like what I was saying before, of like you're also like interviewing the employer too. How does working for the company align with your goals? Because, on paper, everything could sound great when you're applying, but when you go into the interview, you may find out information, that causes you to say like, oh, this, it's not what I thought it was gonna be. I thought I was gonna be focusing on this, kind of work only, but I'm kind of going in a different direction there. And so looking at your goals, because that is extremely important too. And then, yeah, when it comes to questions like, what's your biggest weakness? So I think for interviewing, I always say to be honest, but not too honest. Um, and so I think whenever you bring up a weakness, ideally, it shouldn't be something that will really like prevent you from doing the job. Because, let's say for like my job, I talk to people and students and employers a lot. If I said communication was a big weakness of mine, that would have been, an issue there because this is something I'm doing, so frequently. Um, but I think also a key area too is when you're talking about weaknesses, how are you improving that? Because all of us have weaknesses, no matter what. I don't care what anyone says, we all have some kind of weakness or something we're trying to grow and improve in. And so if communication was a weakness, vice versa, you know, it would be getting into so communication, it is a weakness of mine, but I'm really working on improving this by doing like mock interviews with like career counselors. I'm getting feedback from my professors. I'm trying to volunteer more in class so I'm more comfortable, because when they see that, they see, okay, you're someone who, if you have a weakness, you're going to try to work on it. If you work for our organization and you come across something you don't know, you're going to work on that. And so they want to kind of see that kind of like that mindset there. And so again, and so yeah, again, when we're talking about, the what is your biggest weakness there? And so again, I would say to add on to what I just mentioned, try to avoid the cliches like the I work too hard. I give 110%. Because those aren't exactly weaknesses. You're just kind of trying to phrase that you work really hard as a weakness. And so again, you want to be honest there, with what you're trying to, work on for yourself. And, talking about, things you're able to change. And so whether that is like, like, oh, I'm trying to work more, with like teamwork, or I'm trying to work more, with like computer skills there. Um, because if you kind of looked at your general personality traits, our personality is largely who we are at our core. And I feel like those are things that are hard to change. And so kind of like some of those examples I just mentioned there. And again, yeah, how are you working on that? And so for now, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And so, again, with this question, it's showing that you have career goals. Again, it's okay if you don't have, like a super specific, I know exactly what I'm going to do, kind of plan. And you can be general with this. It could be again, I'm just focusing on graduation. I am hoping, if this applies to you, to remain in the US, to continue to do, OPT, or if you're trying to get like your work visa, like an H-1B visa, so you can work for a longer amount of time. Or it could be, my hope is to graduate, again, get, more experiences while I'm still a student here and, eventually pursue, full-time jobs, in this field, if possible, if it's here or, if it's, in your home country there, for example. And so again, it's okay. You don't have to have your whole life planned out there. And so again, when it comes to avoiding topics that kind of show like you're likely to leave, like I wouldn't recommend phrasing things like, yep, after I'm going to be here for 3 months, I'm going to move on to my next like internship. If you're doing like CPT, for example. So again, you kind of want to avoid like, I'm going to leave. You want to show like, I want to, grow here, get experiences here, you know, for as long as I can before you move on to your next chapter there. And so why should we hire you? And so I would recommend trying to reframe it as like, how are you qualified for this job? Again, what experiences and skills, you're bringing to the table there. And I also do want to say as international students, you're bringing unique experiences as well. You're bringing, experiences from abroad, global experiences that can help you, provide maybe more perspectives, more kind of different views, on certain topics. And so again, really highlighting that as well, because there's a lot of value in that. And then yeah, again, like kind of the uniqueness and the skills and experiences you have there. Okay, so when it comes to preparing for behavior-based questions, and so this is kind of like a question where, it's, oh, tell me about a time when maybe like you had conflict with a classmate, for example, like on a group project. And so I always recommend we use the STAR method. So STAR, to start it off, situation, just describe the situation. What's going on here? T task. What's the task at hand? Like, what are you trying, what are you trying to do? Again, like, is there like an issue that's here? Action. What action did you take? Again, I think this is a really important area because they want to see like how did you respond to that? Like what decision did you choose to make here? And then result. Discuss positive results or lessons learned from the situation. And so with this kind of question, they want to see again if you had maybe a similar or even different situation happen in their organization, how are you going to respond to that? How are you going to react to that? So they're trying to use your past experiences as kind of like, this is like the example of how so and so would be if this came up for them here. So, as an example, tell me about a time when you had to deal with an uncooperative group member. And so, situation and task. So for situation, in my business communications class, we're assigned a group research project. That's a situation. We're in class and you have a project. Now for task, this is kind of like what is the issue at hand? One of the group members was often late to our group meetings or missed them altogether. This was causing resentment in the group and we were struggling to stay on schedule. Okay, so this is the issue. Someone is showing up late and it's hard for them to stay on schedule. Action. This is what you're doing. I spoke to the group member and I asked her if everything was okay. She told me she'd been having car problems and it was difficult to get to campus for our meetings. I recommended that we talk with the other group members and see if we could be closer to this group member's house. So it's like you took the time, this showed you took initiative, but you didn't want to, kind of call them out in front of everyone. You wanted to check in, see what's going on. You spoke to them individually. And, again, when she explained her situation, you helped to provide maybe a solution. And so, with the result, the rest of the group agreed to meet at a different location, and everyone was able to make it to the remainder of our meetings. We completed the project on time and earned an A. And so, again, I do want to say with some of these examples, not everything is as nicely kind of like concluded as this example here. And so again, like what I mentioned before, whether it ideally a positive result would be nice to share, but it also could be a lesson learned, maybe skills you were able to use for that situation to address it there. And so again, when we're looking at these kinds of questions, think about why the employer is asking you the question. Like, are they trying to see what kind of skills you have, whether it's like conflict resolution or teamwork? And then, yeah, showing an example to show those skills there. And so, if you don't have a good example, like let's say the situation never happened to you, you could say, like you could let them know, and again, what you would do if the situation were to occur. Um, and so I would say for this question, really, we're really honing in on that action and result, like those sections there, because that shows like how you addressed it, what you did, and also how it ended as well. And so again, just some good takeaways, for these kinds of questions that they do ask them. Okay, and so when it comes to communication skills, and so for this, so I do want to say, for international students. So, for example, if English, is not, your first language. And so I know this can be a big concern because I know with an interview, it literally is just like a back and forth conversation where a lot of questions are being asked and kind of having to, think quickly there as well. And so, I firstly just want to say again, it is very normal to feel nervous. And I feel like those nerves and anxiety is something that comes up, I think also for anyone in any interviewing, like even for my job here, but for my interview, I'm sweating. I can't stop sweating and I need to shake your hand, but I just have sweat. Um, so I think, a key thing is, again, I think still like showing confidence. And I think to show confidence and to feel confident, again, preparing as much as you can really help with that. And so definitely practicing your responses. So I do want to say it depends. I usually recommend not to memorize your answers because I think from like my experiences, and also in talking to other students too in memorizing, I've had it where I was like, okay, this is going great, and I just completely forgot my next sentence and I did not know what to say and I just kind of froze there. But if that works for you, then I would say go for that because if that's a technique that helps you, it just makes you feel more comfortable, then I would say you can do that. Um, but I would even say it doesn't even have to necessarily be like memorizing your entire answer. It could be like memorizing, like, okay, if they ask me about why I chose to study in the US, these are the two main points I'm going to cover. The first point, because they have a great program for this field at Cal State Long Beach, but also two, I really wanted to grow my network and, learn more about like, navigating, my field here in the States. Um, and so versus having to memorize like a whole paragraph, like going into a lot of detail there. And so I do want to say going at your own pace. And with that, I do want to say not to take so much time with each question, but you can slow it down. You can take pauses if you need to process something they just asked. You can say something like, let me think for a moment. Now, we do want to make sure that moment doesn't turn into, like 5 minutes later, for example. But, again, just kind of like regroup. Okay, what point do I want to bring up here? And, again, you can be open about, your challenges there. And with like communication, this is something you could bring up at the beginning. Like you could say something like, again, like, thank you so much, for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Um, I did want to share, as English is not my first language, I would just appreciate, your patience as we go throughout the interview there and just kind of like very, very concise. I have that at the beginning and they understand that. Um, and, again, if they're asking questions or if they're making points that you're not quite sure what they mean by that, please ask for clarification. I've done that in interviews, because sometimes I'm just like, okay, you said a lot. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying there. Or because if you kind of just start nodding and like, yep, yep, then, it's if they kind of keep talking about that, I feel like you're going to get even more lost there. So you can totally ask for clarification. Um, and also just making sure with active listening that you're being present throughout. I know it's very easy to kind of slip into okay, they're talking, this is what I have to say for the next question. This is how I have to like phrase it. But again, make sure that you're actively listening. So if they bring up certain points at the end of the interview, they brought up at the beginning, you're not kind of thrown off guard there. Um, but also, I think to help, kind of like reassure too, is that they ideally most likely would have your resume as well. And your resume would really have a lot of detail with like your experiences and your skills and your education there. So again, your resume is like there like to like support you, to the interview as well. And again, with body language as well, it's like the nonverbal communication. And so again, kind of like the sitting up straight. I think you could totally use hands when you talk, but maybe not too much. You can maybe just have your hands, like kind of closed in your lap as well. But also not kind of being slouched, not kind of like, kind of like hunched over. If you're, it kind of almost could seem like, oh, like you're bored or not kind of doing any of like these, like, oh yeah, that's great. Again, it kind of shows like, are you taking a nap there? So again, just being, mindful of your body language too. And I think with that too, like let's keep eye contact. Not to say you have to like be staring them down, but just kind of maintaining it as much as you can. And so yeah, just some good points to keep in mind there. Okay, so again, to help you feel confident, practice, practice, practice. So just because you know what you're going to say does not mean you know how you're going to say it. Because, like, I could have in my mind, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to bring up these points, it'll be great. But then it's like, oh, wait, how do I describe that? Wait, was I the leader on that project or was I just helping? And so this just helps you, again, kind of take out those worries there. And so, I'll be showing this resource called Big Interview, I think later on in the presentation. And you can record a practice interview. So you can see, I know recording ourselves and looking at ourselves, it's not maybe the most comfortable thing, but you can see again, like for me, literally, I say the word like and a lot. And I'll use my hands a lot, and I sometimes use it too much. And so I can be mindful of that when I see like my recording there. And you can also do a virtual mock interview or interview coaching with a career counselor, or drop-in advising, which I'll be sharing about those resources at the end of the presentation. And you can also practice with your friends or family, or classmates, or you can also, check in with your professor if they could maybe help you out a little bit during office hours. And so again, just I think talking to saying it out loud, talking to people, talking it out, I think is just so helpful there. All right, and so to segue into big interview, so this is a really comprehensive, super detailed interviewing platform. And so to access this, you're going to go to Career Link, which you can find on your single sign-on, which is where you have like Canvas and Beach Connect. And then from there, you're gonna see at like the very top, like in this black bar here at the top, you're gonna see resources and you'll click on that and then you'll scroll down and then you'll click on Big Interview. And this is free for you to use. And so Big Interview, it has a lot. It has, again, like example questions and example answers. It has, again, oh, how do I respond to those behavioral questions? We have a star tool to help you build your answer. We have practice sets where it's pre-recorded videos, but it'll feel like an employer's interviewing you. And we also have our interview curriculum, which again, it's almost kind of like mini interview classes in a way. And so to show this here for curriculum, you're gonna see fast track and mastery track. So fast track, this is 16 lessons. This is more so like, you know what, I want to get, the fundamentals of interviewing. I want to get an overview here. That's great for that. But if you're like, I want to really go super in depth with interviewing and I want to get as much information as I can, then you could do the mastery track, which is 50 video lessons there. But again, you don't have to do the curriculums. You can jump around, see what teachers you like on the platform there. And then this is an example of what the curriculum kind of looks like, where it has, a lot of videos. It'll let you practice. And yeah, I can just give you some more, pointers there, more information. All right, and so I did want to also bring up virtual interviewing. And so, because again, there are different kinds of interviews. I would say for the most part, it's in person, but again, we also do definitely have like virtual or it could be like a phone call too. All right, so for virtual interviewing, I think especially after, I think kind of like the peak times of COVID and the pandemic, where again, we had just all fully gone online. And so I think with that, I think the effects of that carried on where people are like, the online gives flexibility there. And so definitely be prepared, like for technology. So for video and audio quality, so again, testing it out, you could like call a friend or you could even do like a classmate. And yeah, just to see how your sound is. And, I think what's tended to help me is using like earphones or headphones if you have them. Because if you're only using the computer speaker, that could work as well, but I know sometimes, like for my computer, it's older and the sound didn't come out really great. So again, you could always test it out to make sure. And then, or I think also, even if you do drop-in advising with us, we can test it out. We can see like, oh yes, I can hear you great, or it's kind of hard to hear you. There's like noise in the background there. And then, so we have Wi-Fi connection. So make sure you are connected, that you are in a place with stable Wi-Fi. I have certain spots at my place where I'm like, I have one bar and I have no connection. And so I do recommend joining the Zoom or whatever video call platform they have 5 minutes early. I think just so you can kind of like settle in, make sure you're in the waiting room. But also, if it is on Zoom, making sure, not even on the day of, like beforehand, that your Zoom is updated. Because I've had it, I think, one time where I'm like, I'm ready to join the meeting, and it's like, oh, Zoom needs to update. And I'm like, okay, my interview is literally in like 3 minutes. Thankfully, it was a quick update, but again, I know some have taken longer, or if your computer's older, it might take longer too. I know mine did. I think before. And so, also with electronics, turning off any electronics that could potentially go off, cell phone, smartwatch, put them on do not disturb, or if you're really worried, like me, I just completely turn them off. Um, and so again, just so there's no distractions there. All right, so with your room environment, so again, ideally, if you can conduct your interview in a room that doesn't have too much going on, because in terms of like, oh, maybe you have a lot of clothes around or like, a lot of like decor, furniture, just because we want to keep the focus on you. We don't want the employer to be distracted by that, and we don't want them to feel like, oh, like you it's not giving like the most like professional, like feel there. If there's a lot going on, it feels like you just kind of sat down and like, I'm going to do an interview right now versus like preparing for it. And ideally having kind of like a plainer background. Again, minimizing distractions. You can close windows to prevent like outside noise from coming in, making sure you're the only person in the room if possible, or if that's not possible, you could use like a virtual background. Like those work too. And that way it kind of, I think, prevents you from having to like, I don't have another space. I'm like, no worries, you can use a virtual Zoom background. And again, having good lighting just to create a brighter vibe versus like it's dark, it's maybe hard to see you. And you can always reserve one of our Career Center interview rooms where you can do your interview in one of our rooms, which is nice and bright. We have good Wi-Fi here, if you need that alternative. Okay, and so now looking at the day of the interview. And so when we're looking at the day of the interview, so how do we make that great first impression? And so, again, firstly, professional attire, which I'm going to show some pictures of. But again, being, business, business look, ready to go, versus like a shirt and like shorts, and being on time. And so I always say, give yourself extra time because it may take time because of traffic and then to park and then to walk in and then to maybe use the bathroom beforehand to make sure you all look good to go, and then to go into the waiting area. Um, and again, for the handshake, I would say depends. Some people will really initiate that and some don't. And so I would say if the employer doesn't initiate it, then that's okay. Because again, I also know with like flu season, I also know with COVID too, I know some people, they just want to have like minimal contact, I think. And then also eye contact, like we mentioned before, maintaining that there. Because I feel like sometimes if we're kind of looking down or away, it feels like I'm not connecting with you. It feels like also maybe like less confidence there too. And so again, it's just good to have that eye contact there. And again, showing enthusiasm. And I think that kind of ties into the next one of like being professional but friendly. And so this doesn't mean you have to be like, oh my gosh, I am so excited to be here. I am over the moon. We can bring it down there. We can bring it down a notch. Where again, I feel like it's being, true to yourself still, where, I'm really excited for this opportunity. I've heard such great things about your company from my research too. And so you can show enthusiasm and friendliness by, again, like, of course, smiling. You can also show that with, again, like, making some comments about what they said. Like, oh, they shared about, oh, weekend plans. I'm like, oh, I love that. I've been meaning to, try out that movie sometime. We're kind of having that friendly banter there. Um, and so I think I would say in terms of like the enthusiasm and friendliness, you don't feel like you have to be like funny. I feel like I know sometimes for interviewing it feels like, oh my gosh, I need to make them laugh and they remember me, they're entertained. But I would say as long as you're friendly, enthusiastic, I would say those are the key points. And I would say, if they're kind of cracking jokes, you can crack jokes with them. But if they're kind of more serious, then I would say to follow that vibe. So to kind of see how the employer's feeling there. And then definitely sending that follow-up thank you email afterwards, which we'll be getting to at the end there as well. Okay, and so these are some examples of like professional attire. And so, it could be whether it's like, again, like a suit, maybe like a dress shirt or like a sweater. And then, we have some like slacks or, darker pants. And then you could also do like a blouse or like dress pants, maybe like a nice little blazer or like cardigan. And we have like dress shoes or like pumps or flats. And there's a lot of different ways to approach, what to wear for an interview, but these are some examples here. And then we also have, I think, people who go more for like the kind of the two-piece suits. This is the same color, kind of going for more darker colors like the blues and the blacks there. Um, and again, with the dress shirts too as well. And so, yeah, just some examples there. And so, yeah, I always recommend, being more formal, I would say, for the interview. Again, just to be on the safe side there. Okay, and so, again, for the day of the interview, so when we're looking at, what you're sharing about yourself, what to bring up. And so I would definitely say again, like those international experiences that you've had, in your home country there. And so because again, you can talk about like what kind of skills and or perspectives have you developed, from your time there. And so I think this really helps to show you have more of that cultural awareness because, from your home country, also being here in the US now. And then I think that also really helps you. I think in traveling to different countries or spending time in different countries, it really does help you with, I think, multicultural competency, which again, this essentially is, again, I think, having that like understanding and knowledge or like, striving to obtain that like understanding and knowledge of other cultures, of people from different backgrounds, again, as you communicate and as you interact with them, just so you are more mindful of, again, maybe some of like the cultural norms that they have in their culture. And then definitely the adaptability. Being able to adapt to a new country, is not easy. Again, there are, so many parts, to think about in terms of like, housing, for school. How do I get around? What is transportation like? etc. Um, and again, I feel like, in being an international student, I feel like you can show that adaptability and being able to be in those different environments and to, really showcase I can work in different environments there. And again, overall having that, unique perspective, I feel like when you go into those interviews. And so for academics, and so I know this is a big question that comes up a lot when I work with international students. It's, do I have to talk about it? Like, how much do I have to say about it? And so I would say, like, be prepared to explain the details. Like, you don't have to go super in depth, but I think, again, I know there are different like degree or like certificate types or like grading systems. And so I think being able to kind of give like a quick overview of like, oh, so this number does look small, but this actually means that I received close to a 3.9 GPA, like equivalent to the US here, which is very high, almost a 4.0. And then also like what your reasons for studying in the US are. And so what your goals are, again, with your academics here, like, is this like a J1, F1 visa? Is this more of like, you want to get a degree or more of kind of like cultural exchange here? Um, and again, I need to also circle back to the academics there. I would also say, again, as we're talking about, degree type, I know, some education systems have like rankings. And so maybe if it's like, oh, I was ranked, like number two out of like 2000, for example. And so being able to, address those kinds of points there. Mhm. Okay, so work authorization and visa. And so this is a very common question to be asked because, again, you're an international student. And I do want to say it is very natural to feel worried about this area because I know when it comes to visas, again, approval processes, paperwork, I know there's so many components to it there. And again, I know it can be really tricky navigating this, when you're, especially if this is kind of like your first interview for a first job here, for example. And so, I do want to say be prepared to talk about like your current status, like your visa status. And it's important to be honest because again, we never want to be misleading. We never want to set this expectation that it's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out. And so this is in terms of like that honesty. And so for example, like the time frame you can work, like, oh, whether it's like I'm a student, I can work here until like my last year, for example. And then also if you do need sponsorship, um, and so, I think also understanding the employer's hiring policies, for international students there. And so this is something that you can see if they do have on like a company's or organization's website, but if not, it's something you can bring up during an interview. I would usually recommend though bringing this up like I want to say after you've been able to share a good amount about like your education, your experiences, and your skills, because I would want to get them, firstly, get them excited about what you can offer, and then get into, this is my current status and situation. Um, I did want to see if you've hired students before, international students before, what that process was like, and to kind of like frame it in that way. And then also understanding what options you have to explore. So whether that's like the CPT, curricular practice, curricular practical training, there we go. Um, which again would be, kind of more of like an internship or like practicum that you're doing, or while you're, a student here. And then optional practical training OPT, which again would be like after you graduate, for again that kind of like 1 year of work, here in the US still. So again, I think this is overall very helpful. So like if the employer is asking questions, you can be prepared to let them know like, oh, these are my plans as of now, and this is what I know I would be qualified or eligible to do at this time. And so being prepared, so your materials. So I think it's really good, just to have like your notes, whether it's like for a virtual interview or in person that, you can review beforehand. And, for example, if it has like, oh, these are key points about the company. And then I would also say copies of your resume as well, just in case if they need any extras there. And this it depends on if they ask for it or not. You could bring your references. And so these are like from, like recommendations, or like people who can recommend you, whether it's like a professor or an advisor, etc. Um, but again, if they typically do need that, they would have let you know that beforehand. And then examples of your work, if they did request them, if you're like an art, major, for example, or like English or like linguistics, if they want to see that, then, if you could. But again, they would ideally let you know what you have to prepare there. All right. And so having the right mindset. And so, again, like what I've been seeing throughout, being present, being in the conversation, not just like, let's say they're talking about what they did over the weekend and you're like, okay, we want to have more. I understand the nervousness and you're like, I just want to focus on my next question and my next answer. But again, you're like, oh, like that was great. Like, I'm so happy you got that time for yourself there. And also paying attention to social cues. I think a cue that I've noticed at times is sometimes for an employer, when they kind of stop writing, I'm like, okay, they kind of got the main points they needed from me from that question. I've been talking for a little bit long. Let me kind of move on for now. And then being authentic. So being yourself. Again, don't be afraid to ask for a moment to think before answering a question. It's okay to say you don't know the answer to something. You can always offer, to get back to them about that, if you're really not sure, because I wouldn't want you to make up an answer for something really crucial in regards to your like work visa status, for example, and then you're like, oh gosh, I told them the wrong answer. So you can always get back to them. Being positive, talk positively about your experiences. Never apologize or minimize your qualifications. That's something I see a lot with students where it's like, oh, I know I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm willing to try. Let's just focus on the I am willing to learn and grow. Let's just focus on that part, because we never want to highlight, like, oh, look at all my weaknesses here. We want to be like, I'm working on my weaknesses by doing this. And I would say, ideally, not to speak poorly of like past employers or even like people you worked with, because then there's that fear, like, oh, if you're saying bad things about them, will you say bad things about us, like after you leave our company? And so, also asking questions. And so, asking because there's usually that time where, they say like, oh, okay, we have some time, do you have any questions before us about our company? So firstly, yes, always ask questions because that shows interest in them. Um, and I would usually say to have about like 3 questions prepared just in case. And so it could be things like, asking to the employer, what do you enjoy most about working here? Um, what qualities do you think someone needs to excel in this position? Again, like if you're someone who doesn't ask any questions and they're like, okay, like she didn't ask questions, but these other 2 students did, I should hire them instead. They're showing that initiative, they're showing that energy there. And so now, to bring us to the last section for our presentation today after the interview. So, follow up with the thank you email. Please make sure to do this. Send a thank you email within 24 to 48 hours. I would say to do it on the day of, like send it after that interview on the same day. And so again, in this thank you email, it's fairly concise. It's nothing long. You again are just thanking them for the time they took today, reiterating your interest in the position, your qualifications for the position. If there was like something you bonded with the employer over, or if there was like a unique point that you brought up during the interview, please bring that up. Because let's say they interviewed 20 students that day. they're probably going to get a lot of thank yous, thank yous, thank yous. You want to bring up like, hey, remember when we talked about this? Yeah, I'm going to put my thank you email again here. So it kind of helps remind the employer there. Um, and then if there was like any like information, like let's say they were asking about like your availability for a follow-up call and you forgot to include oh, I'm also available on Friday. You can include that in this thank you email here. And so for red flags, and so this was a survey from employers that they found to be the worst offenses by recent graduates during interviews. So things to avoid: acting bored or cocky, like acting bored or I don't want to be here, or like cocky, like I got this. I don't have to be here. I know what I'm doing. I'm like, don't do that. Humble. Be very humble. Humble and confident. Dressing inappropriately. And so let's say like you're like, oh, I just showed up in like leggings and like a shirt. Again, this is an interview. We want to be professional here, not, very casual. Or like, students who weren't really prepared, like, oh, I don't know what your company does. Oh, wait, I had that on my resume. I forgot about it. That's a big red flag. Bringing out your cell phones or electronic devices going off. You want to be prepared and not to distract the employer there because it almost feels like to the employer, you didn't take the time to make sure that those were off, and we're taking the time to do this with you. It could feel disrespectful to them. Not asking good questions. Like if you're just asking, like, oh, so like how much do you all get paid here, like not bringing up questions like that, but genuine questions about like, oh, do you collaborate a lot with other departments in the company, or do you all kind of mainly focus on your own department? um I think also double checking your social media and your online presence overall. Because if you do have, unprofessional online content, like let's say like you were out like drinking and, just looks like it doesn't look the most, professional there. Which again, anyone can do anything in their free time. Um, but let's say, it was a party that got, like really wild and there's a lot going on. You don't want to be careful with pictures like that because then they could be fearing like, oh, is this like your real personality? Is that how you would be in our job, in our company? And so just doing a scan there, being careful there. Not sending that post-interview thank you note. Make sure to send that thank you note. And then also people also brought up like, please make sure not to spam the employers. They will get back to you. Usually I would say give it about 2 weeks before following up with them again. Um, but also, I would ideally say compensation, like salary or like pay, would be brought up like after like the job offer is extended. And so, kind of holding off on those conversations there, unless they bring it up on their end. All right, and so just to end us off here, so our Career Center hours were open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can follow us on Instagram as well. We post about our events there too. And we also have some support resources. So we do have counseling appointments. These are 30 to 60 minutes, and you must schedule these in advance. Um, and if you would like to schedule an appointment, you can do so on Beach Connect, which you can find on your single sign-on. But also for my appointments, I would say you can also email me directly. And so I just put my email here in the chat if you'd like to schedule. And then for drop-in advising, these are like 15 to 20-minute sessions. These are walk-ins only. And our hours are Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 p.m. Tuesdays through 6:30 p.m., which would be Zoom only. And to get to the Zoom link, you would just go back to career link from your single sign-on, click on that resources tab, and scroll down to find our drop-in advising link. And we're also in person. So Monday through Friday is Zoom in person every day, except for those Tuesdays where it is Zoom only there for those extended hours. And so with that, thank you everyone. Let me go ahead and end the Zoom here.